This conference will now be recorded.
Mr. Stephen Haynes.
Here.
Mr. Jim Ponticello. Mr. Dan Grinnell. For PRTC, Dr. Robert Schneider. Mr. Joseph Stainsby.
Present.
Thank you. For Caroline County, Mr. Mike Fincham. Mr. Craig Pennington.
I'm here.
Thank you. For King George County, Mr. Nick Miner. Ms. Kimberly Wilson.
Here.
Thank you. For GW Ride Connect, Ms. Kate Gibson.
Here.
Dr. Linda Millsaps. Ms. Lee Anderson.
Here.
For the Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transit, Ms. Sierra Williams.
Here, good morning.
Thank you. Mr. Todd Horsley. For the Federal Highway Administration, Mr. Ivan Rucker. For Federal Transit Administration, we have no one listed. And Virginia Railway Express, Ms. Sonali Soneji. Ms. Christine Hoffner.
Here.
Thank you. For Fredericksburg Regional Transit, Ms. Jamie Jackson.
Here.
And Mr. Aidan Quirk.
Hey, good morning here.
Thank you. Good morning. That is all for roll call. You do have a quorum. Everyone may now put their mics back on mute. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Leah. All right, let's see. I guess actually before we move on to item number 3, approval of the TAC agenda, I'd like to make a motion for a modification to strike item 7F3, which was a proposed resolution to modify the TIP. We heard word from VDOT late last Friday that the MPO actually doesn't have to take any action to do administrative action to modify the TIP. So we can go ahead and make that modification without any formal action here. So I'm striking to remove this item from the agenda. With that being said, is there any other modifications, additions, or deletions to the agenda?
Alex, it's Jason. Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
What is the process to modify the TIP then if the MPO doesn't have to take action?
All right, Adam, would you have a response for that by chance?
Sure, I can speak to that. Jason, it depends on the type of modification. So if it's a TIP amendment, the MPO does have to process that. It goes before the TAC and then the policy committee. If it's this type of change, where it's simply called the administrative modification, that does not need MPO action according to VDOT.
This is Eric. Move for approval of the agenda as modified.
Do I hear a second?
Second, Christine Hefner.
All right, any further discussion? All right, if not, I guess we'll just go ahead and take a vote. Everyone in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? All right, we'll go ahead and move forward with the approval of the agenda as proposed with the modification eliminating 7F number 3. All right, so moving on to number 4, approval of the September 8th TAC committee meetings.
Hey, this is Christine. I have a question. On page 3, there's reference to Chick-fil-A needing approval. What is that? Somebody must have been hungry.
Okay, I think that was in regards to a right-of-way acquisition that was in relation to that project, and that was what was kind of driving up some of the costs.
Oh, okay.
Alex, this is Michelle. I have a question about the meeting minutes on the first page, or actually on page 2, under discussion items for the CMAQ RSTP prioritization process. I think the wording under the second bullet point where it says in agreement with VDOT's suggestion, it was not exactly our suggestion to have less emphasis on air quality. It was our suggestion to have a more subjective process and to have a measure that includes something reflective of the TMA area. So I think that wording needs to change a little bit on that second bullet point in the minutes.
Okay, would you want us to maybe just strike that wording in parentheses about in agreement with VDOT's suggestion? Would that kind of satisfy your?
That would be fine. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments about the minutes? All right, I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve the minutes as amended with Michelle's comment there to strike the language on page 2 on number 7 in the second bullet with in agreement to VDOT language.
This is Eric, second.
All right, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, we'll have the meetings approved as amended. Moving on to number 5, review of the September 21st Policy Committee meeting. Adam?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everybody. So a couple quick highlights from the September 21st Policy Committee meeting. I do have the agenda up here for everybody's reference. First of all, Dr. Millsap's providing an update on the hiring process for the FAMPO administrator. So we are all very excited about that process moving forward. There was a first round of interviews for a short list of candidates on September 28th, and I believe that there's going to be a second round sometime this week. The draft TPB FAMPO MOU was amended and endorsed, so we have sent this back to the TPB for their review and consideration. The Policy Committee did take action to fully fund the US 1 and Market Street project. There's more to come on this later from Paul, I believe. The committee deferred action on the call for projects item, so this will be for discussion with the TAC shortly. Staff provided updates on the TIP and the LRTP and presented the FY20 FAMPO annual reports. And then lastly, Ms. Shelton, she reviewed some proposed amendments to the bylaws. I will say that this is likely still a work in progress at this point. VDOT had pointed out that we will likely need to amend the UPWP in order to do that. So those are some quick highlights, Mr. Chair, from the last Policy Committee meeting.
All right, thanks, Adam. Any questions about the Policy Committee summary? All right, thanks, Adam. We'll move on to number 6, public involvement. Did we receive any comments or inquiries from the public?
No, Mr. Chair, we did not receive any. However, I would ask you to see if we have anyone online that would like to make a statement.
Yeah, certainly. That's going to be my next statement. So again, anyone from the public online who wishes to make any comments at this time? Okay, well, hearing none, we'll go ahead and close that and move on to number 7, starting with 7A, discussion items with the CMAQ and STBG prioritization methodology update. I know we have formed our subcommittee or little working group to try to start creating a rough draft that we can then disseminate to the rest of the TAC for review and comments. Currently, this subcommittee consists of myself, Eric Nelson from the city of Fredericksburg, Paul Agnello from Spotsylvania, and Adam Hager from FAMPO, and Bob Schneider from PRTC. I know Adam has reached out to our counterparts at Hampton Roads Transportation Planning Organization to try to get some more information from them about their methodology and process and prioritization. And Adam, I don't think you've heard anything back yet, have you?
So we had a quick meeting Friday morning for about 30 minutes and sort of walked through their process and what types of things they've worked on over the last few years. So I have some notes that I've typed up, and I'll have that back to you shortly, Alex.
Okay, great. So yeah, if you could just disseminate that to our working group here, and then we'll kind of move forward from there. I think kind of our plan is maybe, once every 2 weeks, kind of have a get together with the group to kind of gauge our process and keep moving forward on this.
Hey,
So with that,
maybe Alex?
yes.
I'm sorry, was somebody else going first? This is Michelle, but.
Go ahead, Michelle.
Okay. Hey, I had a question about the working group. At our September meeting, it was decided upon, the TAC meeting, that you would be sending out an email to all of the members of the TAC to form a subcommittee. And that was also captured in the minutes that we just approved from the September meeting. So you have just named members of this subcommittee, but there was no email sent to the entire TAC committee for volunteers. Can we discuss that?
Certainly.
Okay.
My understanding from our last TAC meeting is we kind of established that it would consist of the 3 locality, representative from each of the 3 localities, a member from PRTC to represent the transit interests, and then a member from FAMPO. So I figured at the conclusion of that meeting, there was no need to send out the email blast to the other group who really wouldn't be, I guess, a part of this more focused working group. I just sent that out to Spotsylvania, Fredericksburg, and PRTC.
Well, that was not what was discussed at the last TAC meeting. The last TAC meeting, it was decided that there would be a member from the localities, there would be a member from VDOT, there would be a member from the transit organization, and I believe a couple other people expressed interest in maybe not being members, but being involved. And that was in the recorded meeting. And that was also captured in these meeting minutes that were just approved.
Yeah, I would say, at least for DRPT, we had requested to just be not on the committee, but to at least be involved in the conversations, to be able to sit in and see what was going on.
So this is Paul from Spotsylvania. I guess I had thought that the purpose of this committee was, like Alex said, more of a working group to get into like the weeds of basically the CMAQ and the STBG, and basically the results would be reported back to the full TAC, so anyone on the TAC could basically provide input into it. It'd be kind of a regular agenda item. So I don't think there was an intent for basically the full TAC to not be involved.
Yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I understand, but that was not what was stated at the meeting. It was clearly stated at the meeting that there would be a follow-up email to be sent to all the membership for a request for volunteers. And there was also an email sent by the MPO to all the members to be on the lookout for that email, and that was not done. And that's the purpose of my question.
Hey guys, this is Jason. And I had to leave the meeting early, and so I didn't maybe hear everything that occurred. I do recall that there was discussion about sending out the email, but I think what Alex would, what I hear you saying is that you did send out an email, but that it only went out to the parties that the TAC decided would have representation on the subcommittee?
Yes.
Okay. So maybe there was some confusion about that. Is there anything in the meeting minutes on that part?
It is in the meeting minutes and it is in the recorded meeting. So I would encourage all of you to go back and listen and read through those. that it was not what was discussed and agreed upon at the meeting and then what was carried out. So in the vein of transparency, things that are agreed upon at meetings and recorded should be what happens from these meetings.
Well, sure. I don't think anybody's questioning that, Michelle. I think seems to be a misunderstanding. So why don't Adam, I'm not sure if you can go back and take a look through those. This is my suggestion. Maybe you all disagree, but maybe let's go back and take a quick look and see what the consensus of the group was at the time. And then if we need to add a few more people to the working group, then I guess we could just follow up with another follow-up email after this. When is the working group supposed to meet, Alex?
We haven't had a formal meeting yet. We've just been communicating back and forth over email and then trying to reach out to Hampton Roads to get some more information on their process. Going through the meeting minutes here, it does look like we mentioned including VDOT in the subcommittee. So I'm sorry I missed that, Michelle, and I'll send out an email to VDOT and seeing who you would like to add to participate on this working group subcommittee.
Okay, thank you very much.
This is Kate. Just to echo Sierra, I mean, I think I would like to at least, attend those meetings and listen into the conversation so that I kind of know what's going on when we get back to the TAC meetings. So if you could include kind of the broader group in the meetings, I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah, this is Christine, and Kate beat me to it to say, if you can send the schedule of when this subcommittee is going to be meeting to all the TAC members so that we can at least and have an opportunity to at least listen in as a sort of an observer rather than a committee member to keep up on sort of where the work is going, in addition to the updates that'll happen at the TAC meeting. And I'd appreciate it.
Certainly. I just want to make it clear, we're certainly not trying to exclude anyone from this process and want everyone to have a voice in this. It's just a matter of, kind of having too many cooks in the kitchen to kind of get this thing started. So that's all it really was. So it certainly wasn't intentional to leave anyone out. And I'll go ahead and reach out to VDOT to see if he can join the committee and make others on the TAC aware of when we plan to meet and discuss.
Sounds good. Thank you very much.
All right, if there's no more further discussion for that, I'd like to move on to item number 7B, the call for projects discussion.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chair. So the policy committee on September 21st did decide to defer action on this item. One thing that I'll point out is I think that the waters got a little bit muddy during the conversation. I think that there was a somewhat broader conversation taking place around the 5307 and CMAQ idea. We had simply asked if they would have us as a staff issue a call for projects so that we could at least get some projects on the books, have them scored in case funding becomes available in whatever mechanism it may. So since the policy committee officially deferred action on this, we're essentially at a standstill in some ways. And so I think what we wanted to do today is just put that topic back before this group and see if there's any ideas or ways to move forward and present this back to our policy committee in October.
Hey, Adam, this is Paul from Spotsylvania. I wanted just to respectfully disagree. We feel that the policy committee approved the call for projects back in July, and then in September there was no action taken on it. Basically, there was kind of some confusion and miscommunication at the policy committee. They didn't actually take action on the item. They didn't defer it. So I guess our understanding is we basically have kind of the authority to move ahead. So basically at the last TAC meeting on September the 8th, a number of other committee members had a similar view of basically the July policy meeting, basically giving the authorization for that call for projects. So I just want to say respectfully that I think we do have to go ahead at this point in time. I say certainly the Spotsylvania board members, that was their understanding.
This is Eric. Isn't the issue the availability of funds for which these projects would be able to benefit? Since the 5307 discussion has gone in a direction we didn't anticipate, it seems to me that the call for projects is no longer applicable.
Well, what I would say, is, Eric, is it would be contingent on funds being available. But basically just the expectation is in the next 1 to 3 months, there will be some additional funding available. If it doesn't become available for some reason, then obviously we couldn't allocate any funding to new projects.
Right. Isn't this, though, to try and get something into the smart scale pipeline?
So I'll say it takes a while for basically staff to evaluate and score the projects. And basically with smart scale, yes, it can make the deadline at this point, but it could supplant local funding that localities have basically have pledged towards smart scale if it comes at a later point in time.
Okay.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. This is Jamie Jackson with Fred Transit. I would just recommend that we go back to the minutes again on this one because that was not my understanding from what came out of the board and also what came out of the TAC meetings regarding the ranking and scoring of projects. I do remember Chairwoman Shelton actually referencing projects and how we were going to move forward. And since there was not an ultimate recommendation of how to move forward because of the funding being up in the air as far as what is applicable, even though I have no issue with the call for projects in general, I just want to make sure we clarify that that was not the direction that came from the board as of the last 2 meetings because of the clarity or lack of clarity about the purpose of those funds.
Hey everyone, this is Jason. I think that we have 2 things going on here. I do agree that back in July, I believe it was July, but it was definitely back in the summer. I remember sitting in the meeting with the committee meeting, policy committee meeting, and they did give clear direction on a call for projects. And that was what the TAC was supposed to go and bring back to the policy committee. So I think that we have that as one action. I think everybody understands that the follow-up piece to that would hopefully include some sort of action to provide some funding. But right now, I don't see why we can't move forward with the call for projects and finalize that as instructed by the committee, and then allow them to determine, how they're going to allot funds or, if they'll be able to do that.
Mr. Chair, this is Jamie again. I don't have any issues with the call for projects. I'll just restate that I don't believe, as the past couple of meetings, that was what was stated by the policy committee. But I do not have any issue with moving forward, or at least from Adam's perspective of how to move forward with a call for projects.
Yeah, I kind of agree with what everyone said here. We've kind of, did a call for projects here at the TAC and kind of, came to the agreement that we would have submit 2 from each locality, and it had to be a smart scale project either from this round or previous rounds. And I think our recommendation for the call for projects pretty much stands as is, and we're just kind of waiting for the policy committee to take action to approve the call for projects so we can score them and rank them and, eventually apply some funding to them once we can identify that. So unless anyone else has something different, I think we would just kind of let our call for projects stand as is and bring it back to the policy committee and see if they're willing to take action on it.
Alex, again, this is Jason. I think though the question is, are we supposed to, I thought what I understood the policy committee to do was to say, because we brought back a recommendation on, making a call for projects, and then the policy committee took action and said, okay, we want to call for projects, but we're going to change that. And they distinctly changed it to just being the three municipalities, I believe. And then they sent that back to the TAC for action. So they are expecting a list of projects. I don't think that they're expecting a recommendation again on which you know, how to do a call for projects or anything. They've already said this is these are, you know, this is how we want the call for projects to go. So I think we just need to go ahead and bring something back to them in terms of, you know, a list. I think each municipality, or, you know, however that is going to submit their projects to FAMPO. I think FAMPO staff needs to go ahead and score it. And then, I mean, I think everybody understands that we're probably a month or two or away from trying to get through some of this 5307 stuff, but the timing would likely work out, assuming we can work through the funding side of things, that they would have a list of projects and hopefully a good source of funding.
So just a couple things that I wanted to maybe clarify. I think that I'm in agreement with what Paul said as far as the intention of the policy committee in September. I think part of our hesitation as a staff to move forward came from there was an explicit question asked by our staff saying, would you like us to formally hold a call for projects? The conversation went in a different direction and ended up talking about the broader conversation around what to do with the funding and how much funding is going to be available. And it wasn't until that point where the conversation had moved away somewhat from the call for projects where motion was made to defer action on that item. And so I think that the ask and what the motion that was made and then approved, there was somewhat of a disconnect. And then to speak just quickly to what Jason mentioned there, there was in July direction from the policy committee essentially to take this conversation back to the TAC to confirm and then submit back what the parameters would be for the call for projects, not necessarily, at least from our perspective, and you know, if anybody disagrees, please say so, but to define what the universe of projects could be for consideration of funding. And that was what we had put together at the September 8th TAC meeting. And then again, since the conversation got a little bit muddled, I think at the policy committee, we didn't get a clear-cut, definitive answer, go ahead and do this. I think that, again, like Paul said, that was generally the intent, but that's not what the formal action that was taken this past month. And so there's a little bit of a letter of the law, spirit of the law type of issue, I think, going on here.
I'm sorry, I'm going to respectfully disagree, Adam. The board or the committee was clear back in July that they said to go ahead and do the call for projects back then. If the intent of staff at the last FAMPO meeting was to come back and re-ask that question again that they had already answered back in July, I don't know why we're re-asking the question. I mean, and that's probably where the confusion is coming from on the committee side, because they believe right now, and I can speak for our board members, they believe that we've developed or we're in the process of scoring projects based on the meetings in July. So I don't know why we're going back, you know, and if we go back again to the committee and we re-ask the question a third time, we're going to get even more confusion. You need to go back to what happened in July. There was definitive action that occurred there. They said the call for projects would be held among the 3 municipalities. We need to bring those projects back to the committee. And then from there, let the committee determine what they will or won't do. And if they want to go back and do a different call for projects, or they want to go back and, you know, re-amend something, then so be it. But right now, we have direction from the committee to do one thing, and we haven't done that yet. That's my opinion.
And Adam, this is Paul from Spotsylvania. We agree with what Jason just said. I'll say basically I'll say at the July policy committee meeting, basically when kind of the motion for the call for projects went forward, the change was basically to do 2 applications per FAMPO locality. But basically there was an authorization to move ahead with that. So that's what our 3 board members on FAMPO are expecting. It sounds like Stafford is expecting that as well. I think we have the authorization to move forward with that. And I'll say basically at the last policy committee, basically what was tabled was the discussion of potentially swapping 5307 or whatever type of funding the Vanpool Alliance basically is giving to GWC with CMAQ funding. That's the issue that was tabled.
This is Eric. I'll weigh in. I know that there was action taken in July, but the action again was to develop a call for projects, and I don't know that we did that. And I think there was some question as to whether we could limit it to just the localities. So I think we had direction, but I think again there was confusion, and we didn't actually develop that formal call. And I think it procedurally, I don't think we did what we were supposed to.
I think it'd honestly be best to probably bring this back to policy committee with all the questions recently about, how we're doing things and making sure we're following, the letter of the law and things like that. I think it'd just be best to make sure we've got that clarification and written approval from the policy committee that we can go ahead and move forward with the call of projects and begin the scoring and ranking and set these projects up for future funding opportunities.
This is Eric again. I think we're going to continue the confusion if we do that. I think we need to give some definition to this. We don't know the funding source, so it's like we're developing projects in hope of something, falling out of the sky. I don't know that we have a lot of credibility with that, because the initial effort was with the thought that we would be freeing up money with 5307, and that effort has not gone in the direction that people anticipated.
So Erica, this is Paul. The expectation would be it would be CMAQ or STPG. I know there's like 770,000 of that currently available. Additionally, basically, if some of the Vanpool funding can be swapped with the CMAQ, that could free up an additional 2.8 million. So it is contingent on that. The issue is with basically the call for projects and basically scoring and ranking the projects, having the FAMPO staff evaluating that takes time to do. And basically, it's expected that basically this funding will develop in the next 1 to 3 months. So basically, there was a desire to try to move ahead with this as that funding develops.
So then I think that's what we make clear, so that there's again, I don't think it's fair to throw stuff at the policy folks and expect them to fix a problem. I think, again, if you've identified the funding, and you have, then that needs to be part of what we move forward with.
Can I make a recommendation? I think, regardless, why don't we finish the call for projects? Because in my opinion, that's what happened in July. But regardless, when we come back to the policy committee, we bring them the list of projects based on the direction we believe they gave us in July, and we say, here's it is, and we understand that there's some confusion over the funding, and just explain to them that, there was still some confusion over the call for projects even, and let them determine then that if they want to move forward in that manner, or if they want to go back and, redevelop the call for projects. I think that if we go back and we just say, hey, do you guys want us to do a call for projects again? They've already answered that in July, and I think that's where the confusion's coming from. So I think we need to, if we're going to go back to them, we got to go back to them anyway. I think we just go back to them with what we understood that they told us to do in July, and then say, if you have different direction, please let us know.
Good morning, this is Jamie again. I think we may all be looking at the same screen for the minutes from that July meeting that y'all are referencing. So what I'm seeing from this is to defer that action from the policy committee. And it does look like we've got the information on what, who voted how. And again, I'm going to defer to the chair on his statement, because I don't have any issue with his statement about how we should proceed. But based on what we're all looking at, the motion to defer action for call for projects for funding, that was made. So
Thank you, Jamie. I think this is Eric again. The motion is clear because of the nature of the call for projects, and I don't know that we've addressed that motion.
Yeah, this is Alex. I mean, thanks, Jamie, for kind of pointing that out, and Adam for bringing up the minutes here. I think it's kind of clear, leaves off with a statement that, the TAC here is supposed to define the parameters for the projects to be submitted.
correct.
I think we've kind of already done that. We've kind of established that the 3 localities would each be able to submit 2 projects that were smart scale projects, either submitted this round in round 4 or a previously submitted project. So I really don't know what else we can do besides, I suppose we could go ahead and move forward with our call for projects and have them kind of submitted and ranked and scored and kind of have that in our back pocket. But I think we still need direction from the policy committee that we can move forward with actually scoring these projects, ranking them, and setting them up for future funding.
Agreed.
This is Jason again. I'm going to tell you, and we can go back and rewatch the meeting if everybody wants to.
How will we do that?
Excuse me, I'm speaking. Just a moment, please. We can go back and rewatch the meeting, and perhaps there was confusion at the July meeting, and if this is what was voted on, then that's what was voted on. But I can just say that from our board members' perspective, this isn't what they understood walking out of there. So I don't know. I don't really know how to address that because we have a set of expectations now. And it sounds like at least Spotsylvania members have the same. I'm not really sure why they would defer action for a call for projects, but then define very specifically that it would only be the FAMPA locality projects without consideration for transit. I guess I'm not really sure. Are we saying that we're going to bring back another call for projects and say this is how it would work for FAMPA locality projects only?
Jason, this is Adam. That was essentially the ask at the September meeting, and I think as we've established, I think that there was a general understanding that they wanted to move forward, and which is why your board members have that position. So again, I don't think anybody's questioning whether the policy committee wants to do it. For us, it's a matter of trying to go by the letter of it here and make sure that there was formal motion with a definitive yes answer to our staff to move forward. So we're not trying to hold back the process or anything. We're just trying to go exactly with what the actions that were made. So Mr. Chair, I'd like to put out a proposal here that would honor the explicit action taken at each of the preceding policy committee meetings, but also give us, to what Paul said, give us and our staff some time. Could we perhaps have a motion to take the question itself, do we hold a call for projects, back to the policy committee, but then have collective buy-in from this committee, from the TAC, to go ahead and be on the same page with our staff, to go ahead and do the scoring. We have projects that have been submitted in accordance with what the TAC recommendation was in September. Go ahead and do the scoring, and as you indicated, kind of have that in our back pocket should things move forward at the October 21st policy committee meeting. And we're kind of back to, at that point, a level playing field. So is that something that this committee might recommend collectively?
So Adam, you're basically saying try to move forward on both fronts?
Right.
I think that's fair.
Yeah. So Adam, just to clarify, what would be the action requested of the policy board on the 21st of October?
I think that the question would be the same question from September. Do we have projects that we score for consideration of funding, regardless of what that funding amount may come out to be. And it sounds like, at least according to Stafford and Spotsylvania, that has already been sort of the underlying intent. And so I don't think that would go against the wishes of the policy committee as a whole. And so this would effectively, if things were to move quicker and potentially have leveraged funding on some of these smart scale projects, we wouldn't then be in a rush to score projects right after the policy committee meeting. It would allow us to be doing that work now. But with the buy-in from the TAC, it would not be an isolated decision that our team has to make.
This is Eric. I understand the reason to be prepared. What, again, going back to these minutes and what people, their intent or what they think or whatever is interesting, but the minutes, these are approved minutes, and so this is technically all we have to go by. And my question, I guess, is have we addressed, have we defined the parameters? And I guess if we're saying the parameters are localities only, then I guess we have. But was there more to it than just that?
Eric, to your question, the TAC on September 8th did take action to move forward with 2 projects per locality, each of which have to be smart scale. So that was a formal action taken by the TAC in September.
Okay, then I think we're there.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, based off the discussion and Adam's kind of proposal, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion then to go ahead and we'll have FAMPO, I believe each locality has gone ahead and submitted their 2 prospective projects. Go ahead and have FAMPO staff score those projects, and then we'll present that again at the policy committee saying, hey, if you guys are okay to move forward with the formal call for projects, here's what's been submitted and scored and ranked, and see if they want to agree to that preliminary list for future funding purposes.
Second.
Any other further discussion?
Will these projects be scored in advance so that we can see the scores before they're presented to the policy committee?
Adam, is there enough time to get that done?
That's a really good question, Michelle. I think in theory, that's exactly what we'd like to do. I think in my head, the way I was thinking about the timing is we would simply present the projects absent scoring to the committee. And then hopefully, if we can get the formal yes to move forward with this and these projects, if there was going to be the potential to put some leverage funding on smart scale projects, we would then need the policy committee to then meet a second time in October to go ahead and sign off on the proposed allocations, which that too may involve a TAC recommendation on what the allocations should be. So as far as a process and timing perspective, we could potentially, I guess, present the scores with the projects at the first policy committee meeting to accelerate that process, if you will.
This is Christine, and this is just an observation. I think to present the project list without having, scored them or evaluated them in any way, I think potentially limits what information and the usefulness of presenting them to the policy committee for discussion, and I think can just perpetuate some of this confusion. I would suggest having a score, at least a preliminary scoring, to help inform the discussion. And I guess the other question is, if you're not clear how much funding is available, then what is the benefit of presenting the project? But just a couple. Just as an observer, this is somewhat confusing as to what you're trying to achieve from this action.
So Christine, this is Paul. I believe on basically the schedule that Adam laid out, it was done that way just to try to give a chance for getting approval, funding, basically for these projects by the Smart Scale deadline, which is October the 30th. I'll say if that deadline was not in effect, I'm not sure if it's possible to get an extension on that. You know, we could just come and run through all this in the November timeframe, basically for the FAMPA meetings. But I believe that October 30th, the Smart Scale deadline is what Adam was kind of referencing, which would necessitate maybe some additional meetings to try to basically get done the various steps that need to get done by that point.
All right, any other further discussion? All right, if not, we've got a motion and a second to go ahead and score the projects and present that to the policy committee. I'd like to go ahead and call for a vote. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, motion passes.
Alex, this is Eric. One thing related to this, if we're gonna, this is gonna have the impression of being rushed, and there's no way around that. But if there's gonna be a second meeting in October, we better be doing public notice really soon.
Okay. Let's see. All right.
So I guess I'm going to ask a question.
Sure.
So I'm going to ask a question here. Should we go ahead and tentatively pick a date for the TAC to convene, have one agenda item to go over and propose allocations, assuming the policy committee moves forward, and if not, we can then cancel that meeting?
Sounds reasonable.
All right. Yeah. Let me just look on the calendar here.
The policy committee is October 19th. I think I said the 21st earlier.
And we want to meet before the policy committee?
Well, we potentially, well, that's a question there too, is would we want to do so beforehand and come with preliminary scoring and preliminary allocations, which might put the cart ahead of the horse a little bit, or meet after they take formal action and go over proposed scoring, which would then have the policy committee potentially meet, say, October 26th, so that we can get the information to VDOT by the 30th. So there's kind of two ways to approach it.
I'm trying to think really, I mean, the problem is really what funding is available besides if we don't do like this 5307 swap, there really isn't a whole lot of extra funding available for these 6 or so projects that we've called for.
Right.
I guess we should probably set a tentative meeting after the policy committee's 19th meeting, so that they go ahead and approve the list of projects, we could kind of look through to see what funding is available and how we could kind of apply it to those projects. And hope to have, hopefully maybe if we could allocate some money, the policy committee can meet again, the week of the 26th.
Right.
Adam, this is Paul from Spotsylvania. What if we tried to meet on like October 21st, and then that would be contingent on the policy committee giving the go-ahead with this idea on the 19th?
I think that works for our team. Alex, does that work for you?
Yeah, Wednesday the 21st looks good for me. Is anyone else seeing any major calendar issues with potentially having another TAC meeting on October 21st?
Alex, this is Michelle. I'm not available that day, but other VDOT representatives are.
Okay. All right, well, hearing nothing else from the group, I guess we'll just go ahead and set the date for a tentative TAC meeting for Wednesday, October 21st. All right, I think we can go ahead and move on then to item 7C about funding for US 1 Market Street. Paul?
Thank you, Alex. This will be a quick update. I'll say that as Adam mentioned, basically in kind of his policy committee recap, the FAMPO Policy Committee voted to fully fund this project with an additional approximately $1.12 million in CMAQ and/or STBG funding at its last meeting. I'll say the project could be funded now using existing CMAQ or STBG funding, as funding for this project takes precedence over lower ranked projects on the priority list or any new projects, but with the expectation that some additional CMAQ and STBG funding will be available within the next 1 to 3 months because of some of the issues we've discussed. We think that this development could better facilitate the transfers needed to fully fund the project. And as a result, we've decided to temporarily wait on working with FAMPO to update the CMAQ STBG spreadsheet to reflect the FAMPO Policy Committee action at this time. But we're hoping to do that in the next 1 to 3 months. Happy to take any questions.
Paul, this is Kate. Are you envisioning that we will discuss this kind of at the same time that we're discussing the call for projects and the potential swap?
Potentially, I'll say this is an existing project. This would take precedent over funding for any new projects.
Mm-hmm. So but there's not funding available right now, right? Like we would have to move funding from projects that are currently allocated to this project to make up the gap.
So I'll say on the list, this project basically is not at the bottom of the list. There are a number of projects below it, so potentially funding could be transferred from some combination of those projects. There's also about $770,000 CMAQ or STBG that's currently available to be allocated to projects that's not on any active projects. So something could be done. We would like to wait basically until some additional funds are developed, since we think that could help facilitate the process of developing the necessary transfers.
Okay, so just to understand, it could come from a variety of places. It could come from freed up money that we're talking about. It could come from a project lower on the list. It could come from money that's not allocated.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
All right, any other further questions for Paul? All right, Paul, well, thanks for that update. We'll move on to item 7D, which is the US 1 and Telegraph Road project update. Similar to the Market Street project there in Spotsylvania, just wanted to give a brief update on this. Originally, our project was estimated about $8.8 million, and we had full funding for that project between Smart Scale and county money. We're getting ready to enter the right-of-way acquisition phase, and our most recent cost estimate is now showing a cost of $9,637,000, which is a cost increase of about $837 above our current estimate. We have identified some local funds to make up for the shortfall, but the county would be looking to find about $745,000 in either CMAQ or RSTP funds to help kind of make up this shortfall. And similar to the Route 1 Market Street project, we're kind of putting the call for funds on this one for hold right now until we can kind of identify, kind of like the larger pool to really kind of split up across the projects.
Alex, this is Eric. Would it make sense to include this project and the Spotsylvania County project in the information that we take to the policy, indicating to them that while we're making a call for projects, the available funding might end up going to these existing projects?
I think that's a great point to make, that, in addition to these 6 new applications, we already have 2 other projects we're going to be seeking funding for as well.
Right, and they've been ranked. I mean, they're ahead of the list.
Right.
Right.
All right, I guess with no other questions or discussion on that item, we can move on to the next, which is item 7E, Smart Scale Round 4 update. Stephen Haynes with VDOT, could you kick us off?
Yes, sir. Good morning, Stephen and VDOT. Adam asked if I would brief the TAC committee on the status of Smart Scale Round 4, so I will do that briefly. I see you're going to advance the slides for me, so I appreciate that. So we'll go to the next slide, and the next slide. Currently, we're in screening for the validation process. The reason for this, while most applications were pre-screened in, many had conditions that were related to either project readiness, eligibility, was a VTrans midterm need met, or so on. So we're in the process now of validating those questions, making sure that the screening is done. Validation basically is the accuracy of the information provided in the application. So there are a number of specialists, VDOT, that are going in and doing validation on many, many different aspects of the project. The most important question, of course, is the description, sketch, and estimate match. So that's where we are now. As you can see here, there are 36 projects for Fredericksburg District. You can see the total funding for those projects would be over $500 million, and the total request through the program is $377,688. Next slide, please. And again, we have this broken down so you can see the number of projects that were applied under the different types, and we had 7 in Fredericksburg District. They're bike ped projects. 5 were in the Fampo area. Those were Lafayette Boulevard Multimodal, 17 B stars, the Route 1 stars in North Stafford, which of course has a shared use path. And you could probably look at those and go, okay, so were they just bike ped? No, they included other significant aspects and features such as highway, and but they also had enough bike ped that they qualified to be considered as a bike ped improvement primarily. The 2 that were very obviously bike ped improvements were Harrison Road VCR Trail and the Idlewild VCR connection. So those were the types that were classified as bike ped. The rest were all highway in the Fredericksburg District. Next slide, please.
Hey, Stephen, this is Paul. I just had a couple quick questions on the last slide. Just in terms of the total number of projects for Fredericksburg District and just the grand total for the state, is that about the same as what it was last time? And I guess, do these figures reflect any basically screening out of projects because they don't meet kind of VTrans requirements or any other state requirements for Smart Scale?
Well, at this point, of course, we haven't made all the determinations on which projects will actually move forward. There are still a number of projects with what I call enough issues that we can't say for certain that, for example, that those 36 will all screen in. It's our hope that they will, and that we'll be able to, resolve any issues. I would say in terms of the number of projects, it's very similar, especially in Fredericksburg District. We have seen this kind of holding steady. We're between 30 and 40 projects. Yeah, that one's, pretty consistent with what we've seen before. I don't know if that was everything you asked, but yeah, we are still doing validation, it's very well possible that, one of the projects will be determined to have not, to not meet project readiness. I think we don't have any issues with any eligibility, but, there are discussions. Again, a number of specialists are looking at these. We this year, and we'll get into this in just a minute, we have the state understanding of project scope, which is kind of a new step to help get consistency statewide. So there are, there's just more pieces and parts this time to make our determination on which projects will be able to move forward as validated.
Sounds good. Thank you, Stephen.
Yes, sir. We'll go to the next slide then. The project readiness was the most common, and back when we did pre-screening, I know just a vast majority of the projects were screened in with a condition, and the condition was normally, is it ready? And those types of things included is there a planning study that supports this project? That was one of the things that we were missing. Of course, as you go down, you can see in the planning requirements, IJR signal justification. Were those reports completed, or will they be complete by the time that the scoring is taking place? So, any of those types of questions were presented, brought up at the time of pre-screening, and most of them have been settled. Some have not. And again, those would be reasons that during this validation process, a project would continue to be screened out or would find itself being screened out. So again, we're getting close to the end of this, but we haven't made all of those decisions yet. So if we could go to the next slide. I mentioned state understanding of project scope. This is new to round 4, and basically we're just trying to get consistency statewide. As you can imagine, every applicant looks at the rules, they look at the technical guide and they interpret that as best they can. Every district planning manager accepts these, applications and evaluates them in their, to the best of their ability, but with some variation, certainly, of different people, different areas of the state. Then the folks at OIPI, you have a different reviewer there. So what we've tried to do with this is make sure that it is very clear what each and every feature that's being proposed is. And so if we have every feature listed clearly as best we can, and again, this is something that in round 5 will look a whole lot better because we just, it's new and we're vetting this and making changes and really on the fly and trying to get the best thing we can for this. But it basically is the OIPI folks that will, ultimately make these decisions. They wanted a better way of making sure that they were looking at each project through the same lens. And so you can see here, they're going to use it for validation of application, cost estimates in the scoring, and as baseline for identification and assessment of future project changes should the project be successful. I don't think I have to explain to any of you here that have worked with SmartScale before that things do change. We were just talking about a project up at Telegraph and Woodstock. Projects, they definitely go through some changes, and that's when we will need to go back and say, okay, what was in the SmartScale application precisely, and we'll be able to say, okay, this is what the SUPS was on that. So again, that's something that was very wisely determined to be a good tool in round 4, and we'll continue forward. If we could go to the next slide. And this is just kind of a flow chart, of what happens. Central office, they write the SUPs based on what they see in the application. Comes to me, I review it. Sometimes I bump it back. In fact, this morning I looked at a number of them and bumped back a couple that just something went wrong, something wasn't included. Once I approve it, it goes to the applicant. The applicant can make further comments. So we went through a first round of SUPs vetting back in August, and now we're doing the final one. So you might find some comments coming through. You might find an alert coming through to you regarding this. And if you do, please take a look and let us know. So again, that's continuing. it is not contingent upon the October 30th deadline. Our subs review can go on beyond that and is intended to go on beyond that, although we are trying to, get this done along with the validation as soon as possible. We could go to the next slide. Again, this is just shows a typical scope. SUPs, you have a list of 5 features that were important on this, and the district validator, if I agreed with that, I would concur, and then it would go to the applicant, and the applicant can concur or not concur. And I know on a number of them, most of them I caught most of the errors, but I know Eric Nelson, you found one on one of your projects that I had agreed with the SUPs and you had disagreed. You found some error or something with. So that's why it's, multiple levels of validation on that. If we go to the next one. And we have room for questions. I don't want to necessarily entertain any specific projects. If you have any questions on specific projects, as soon as this meeting is over, I'd love to talk to you about it. But if you have any general questions, I'd like to entertain those now.
Hey, Stephen, this is Paul from Spotsylvania. With regards just to getting a locality input on basically the state understanding the project scope, when do you think the time frame for that will be in terms of just getting the final concurrence?
Well, you should be seeing those coming through to you as far as alerts, and I assume there's alerts. Sometimes I don't know what actually generates an alert to you, but if you would take a look at your applications, that's probably the best way to do it, to make sure we don't miss anything and see what the status is. Again, this very morning I approved a number of SUPs, so if you want to go in and take a look at those, at your, for projects on a regular basis, maybe once a week, and see what comments may have come up, just in case you didn't get an email alert, for example, that'd be wise. And you can tell the status based on, the information is there. So if I've gone in and I've said I concur, you'll be able to see that, and then that next step will be your concurrence.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't seen a email alert like in the last day or two, but I'll double check.
Yeah, if y'all would, and that would be a big help, because again, the SUPs is a totally different aspect of this, and I know that it does generate some alerts, but there were some odd things going on with the portal. Like I actually made some comments regarding some of the applications, and the weird thing was it put it in the application that I had generated an alert, but it didn't direct it to the applicant. It actually came up and asked me to acknowledge it. Well, that's pretty silly. I put it in there. Why would I acknowledge? It was really needing for you to acknowledge it. So there were a few problems with the portal that way. And again, it's a new aspect here. So if you would, everyone would just check their applications. Like I said, if you could just check them weekly, that'd be good. And you can probably see what's going on as far as the, approval of SUPs. Again, I point out that the final deadline for resolutions of support, and particularly things like FAMPO's debating regarding the, funding sources that might be available, or any of the counties that might have different leveraging funds they would like to apply. Those things are due by October 30th. I think I heard Paul mention an extension, but I'm certainly not in any position to approve an extension, but we would have to request that. And I would think those will be rare. So we definitely need to have all these things resolved by the end of the month if possible. And that's all I have. If anyone has any more questions?
Hey, Stephen, this is Paul. I just had a quick question on the extension issue. Like, if the FAMPO Policy Board wanted to request an extension, could they do that?
Sure. What you want to do is get me, send a letter to me, give me as much specific information as you can regarding why and what you're looking for, and I will push it up the chain and see what kind of response we get.
Okay.
And that's all I have. Thank you, Alex.
Yes, thanks, Stephen. That was very informative. And geez, with Fredericksburg District seeking $377 million ourselves, I guess there's no chance we'll get all that money, but we'll certainly try.
Yes, sir.
All right, well, if there's no more further questions for Stephen, then I guess we'll move on to item 7F, the tip update. Jordan, if you want to go and kick that off.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just wanted to let everyone know that FHWA and FTA approved the STIP tip for the state of Virginia at the federal level, and it was implemented October 1st. And the state will conduct 3 STIP tip amendment rollovers for the 21-24 tip. And FAMPO is in the 3rd amendment, and we'll see action near the end of the year or early next year. And a couple modifications will be coming through based on what the state is doing with performance measures. Last meeting, we talked about the one for Fred Transit with Tier 2 transit in the region. So there might be a few more modifications coming through. And then if Adam could open the environmental justice methodologies, and we'll go through that. So this is the environmental justice determination for the TIP. And as you guys know, the TIP is 4-year fiscally constrained project list for any projects that have federal funding. And environmental justice is based on 2 executive orders, 12898 and 166, to reinforce basic legal rights for Title VI in the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So EJ is supposed to identify fair and meaningful involvement for all people regardless of race, color, national origin, or income. And if we go to the next slide, this is important because we want to analyze the benefits and burdens of proposed transportation plans and see if they disproportionately affect or cause adverse effects for low income and minority populations. So what is the most appropriate way to determine this methodology? And we looked through 3 different methods in the state and from VDOT. And the first one is from the Richmond TPO and their 2040 LRTP. And they looked at the regional average for each population and said that anything above the regional average was designated as a area that had a concentration of that sensitive population. So if you go to the next slide, you can see a map of our region. So this is highlighting age under 5. So this is just the average for the FAMPO localities. And then if you go to the next slide, we highlight limited English proficiency just to show multiple examples. Again, this is just at the average of what the region has. And then the next the pros and cons of this is the pro is it kind of errs on the side of caution and has a conservative amount of census tracts that are selected. The con is that there's a large number of census tracts that are selected and might not show the most densely concentrated protected populations. And the next method is from VDOT manual in 2000, and we reached out for an updated manual that might have been at a more current year. So we're waiting for feedback for that. But what they recommend is like the Richmond TPO, highlighting anything that is above the regional average, but also what is meaningfully greater. So a census tract that has a 10% average, but the regional average is 5%, and that making it twice the average might be statistically significant. However, a census tract that is only 5% different from what the regional average may not be statistically significant. And this is the regional threshold equation that we use. So we took the FAMPO regional average and times it by 2. And so if you go to the next slide, this highlights any census tracts that are twice the regional average. In this case, the highest percentage of age under 5 is only 11.6%. So the doubled regional average is 12.84%. So it doesn't highlight any census tracts. And then for the limited English proficiency, 4.5%, and the highest percentage in the region is 15.9. So some of those tracts are highlighted. And to the pros and cons of the methodology, it highlights a smaller number of census tracts that have higher concentrations of the protected population. However, the con being if the highest, the doubled average of the region has a higher number than the census tract, you might miss out certain census tracts that have some concentration of that protected population. And then the last methodology from the Richmond Valley TPO for their 2045 LRTP, they created an environmental justice index. And what they did was calculate the regional average of a target population. and they use standard deviation. So anything within 0 to 0.25 standard deviations away from the average was given a score of 0. Any additional 0.25 was added 1 point with a maximum of 10 points. Lastly, they summed up all the target populations to create the final index. And so if we go to the next slide, this shows what it would look like for age under 5, with anything in gray being negative standard deviation or within the 0.25, giving it a score of 0, all the way up to a score of 10, anything over 0.25 standard deviations away from the mean. And then again, with limited English proficiency by household, the same thing, anything in gray is negative standard deviation or 0.25 above the mean, which is given a score of 0, and then anything else added. And then this is the sum, creating the index, and it is limited English proficiency plus age under 5, and this would show a combination of which populations are highly concentrated from multiple protected populations. And out of these 3 methodologies, this pro and con has the ability to easily compare target populations, show a comprehensive approach and look at multiple populations at once, but also is the standard deviation a meaningful measure for only 63 census tracts in the region. And then we have our source page with the information and then questions back for you at the TAC. What method of these, if any, are most fitting for our region? And I'd like to take that back and ask if you guys had any recommendations on that.
This is Eric. How do we use this information? I mean, are we just looking at the impact, or do we use it to determine need as well?
So what we do is we have the proposed project at a certain location and analyze what populations will be impacted by that project and try to determine if it is a positive or negative impact. Like the second question on the slide states, what is a critical factor for determining if the proposed improvement is adverse or not? Meaning like a bike and pedestrian crosswalk is probably a positive safety improvement, but potentially widening a highway that might have some right-of-way implication may not be. And that's also part of determining this is we determine what census tracts are critical for this, but also when we determine those census tracts, how do we determine if the project itself is disproportionately high or adverse effect on the populations?
Good morning, this is Jamie. If I may, Mr. Chair, I'd just be curious, can we have or access any of, I know you use census data, but will we be able to access any of your tables to kind of review some of those components? And also, I guess my only other question would be, how would you or how have you used this or tested any of this methodology on any of the current projects? Even some of the ones we just recently discussed, have you looked at those as well?
So for the second methodology we used for our rural long-range transportation plan, which is just doubling the average, and we used that and compared it to the projects that intersect with those census tracts. And it showed that most of the projects do not have disproportionately high effects because a lot of the projects that were proposed in the LRTP had bike and pedestrian improvements. And that report will be in our policy committee meeting for this coming month. But for the TIP, which is what this is going to be going for, we haven't overlaid it with any of the proposed projects yet.
Yeah, I would just recommend giving us a little bit more time to digest this and just being cognizant and looking at the data tables that you provided or the census tract maps that you provided for specifically interesting were the LEP populations as well, but just remembering just because it is an improvement per se, like a bike trail, that could still have a harmful impact on those communities as well as it relates to accessibility and other factors. And usually MPOs don't really delve that deep. It's usually the jurisdiction or the transit agency in our case looking at those But it does beg the question that moving forward with these projects, that additional outreach needs to occur for a lot of these projects, especially if you're dealing with some of the Title VI populations and EJ populations, because they will not have access to provide comment on these types of projects through traditional outreach and public outreach. We've noticed that in transit moving forward, that I've had to either change or access different communication methods because not everyone speaks English. So I would just note that as well when we're looking at these projects and their impacts, that we may have to go a little bit beyond the map because I noticed some pretty dark areas as far as the color of the map goes, and the red and the maroon. So that's just my comment. I would love to take some time to look over the data and, I guess hone down on some areas for my benefit, but that's all I had.
Yeah, this is Kate. I would just second what Jamie is saying. Maybe send the information out and ask for feedback from the TAC by a certain date. But I think maybe if we could digest it a little bit more. I guess the other question I had, I think methods 1 and 2 was just kind of a yes or no versus method 3 where you kind of showed a scale. I thought it was kind of helpful to show the scale. So that's just one comment from me, but thank you for putting this together.
Of course.
All right, well, if there's no more comments on this, Jordan, thank you very much for the presentation. I think I kind of echo everybody in the group. I think it'd be best if you could kind of send this out to the TAC and then ask for us to, kind of pick our best methodology moving forward and have that submitted to you, either by the end of the week or end of next week or something like that.
Yeah, sounds great. I'll send out something in the review email that will be sent out for the TAC.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. All right, I guess we'll move on to the next item, 7G, the 2050 long-range transportation plan update.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chair. So we did, of course, last month, we shared a high-level work plan that we have put together, and we asked for participants on our informal working group that we're going to have, which will kick off later this month. So if there's any other folks that would like to participate on that, and again, this is largely informal, and it'll just provide some more detailed guidance and feedback with some of the work that we're doing. Please, of course, let me know. Since last month, one of our primary efforts has been assessing our 2045 goals and objectives and the extent to which they reflect the federal planning factors. So for everybody's reference, I have included those here from map 21 and then the US code reference. And so essentially our goals should line up and reflect what these 8 planning factors are. And so what I'd like to do, I'm going to breeze through the next handful of slides that list out the individual goals. One thing that I'll point out kind of as a caveat, as our staff has assessed, again, the extent to which these do reflect the planning factors and kind of the current universe of transportation planning at the regional level, is that these are not all that old, right? These were developed and approved with the 2045 LRTP in the summer of 2018. So it's not like this was done 5, 6, 7 years ago. These are, again, relatively new. So what I'd like to do, I don't see anybody that is on the phone only. I think everybody has access to see my screen. I'm just going to read through the goals. If anybody would like me to that doesn't have access to see my screen, please let me know. But I have highlighted a few words in bold as far as, again, how the 5 goals for the LRTP tie into the planning factors. And so, again, I'm just going to breeze through if I can, and feel free to stop me, anybody, the 5 goals and then their corresponding objectives. So I'm just going to go through these here quickly and then ask for some feedback here at the end. So part of what we're looking for this month is we are asking for committee input on the goals and objectives, and there's kind of 3 primary questions that I would throw out to the group. First is, are there any major deficiencies in the goals and objectives? Secondly, is any language outdated, confusing, or vague? We want this to be very user-friendly for the public. Again, it should be the primary way over the next 30-year horizon that the public's will is sort of, enacted as far as transportation goes. And then lastly, are there any new goals or objectives that should be added to the 2050 LRTP update? So what we're going to do over the course of October, Stacy Fine, our public involvement coordinator, is in the process of developing a survey that's going to be distributed to the public toward the end of this month that will be largely informed by what the committee's feedback is this month. And then based on that feedback, as well as the survey responses, we're going to develop some recommendations to the policy committee in November for some potential updates to the goals and objectives. And so I realize it's a lot of text, it's a lot of information if you're not too familiar with the goals and objectives in the LRTP. So I will at this point though ask if there is any initial feedback for us or things to consider when developing the survey that we're going to distribute to the public. But otherwise, just like we're going to do for the EJ methodology with Jordan, we'll put this in the follow-up email if folks want to spend some time after the fact reading through some of the text-heavy information, if you will.
Adam, this is Eric. I had a substantial number of edits to this and some questions, and I'm going over those with you here with the whole group would probably be very time-consuming, but I'm happy to forward these to you and CC anybody else who wants to look at them. But I do think that there are some deficiencies. I mean, I appreciate that we've taken the 9 federal goals and reduced them to 5, 8 federal goals. But I think we've changed certain things. For example, goal number 2, encourage and promote, and encourage is one of those weasel words that nobody takes seriously. But it says preservation of the surface transportation system. And I think we get away from the federal language by including the word surface rather than something more general, such as for motorized and non-motorized users. And surface also indicates maybe we don't include transit, so I don't think that was the intent. In goal number 3, the last sentence says safety improvements will include standards to protect persons with disabilities. That doesn't mean anything. And so I think, that needs work. So I think, and then goal number 5, support economic vitality. And then we specify by enabling global competitiveness, productivity, and efficiency. Again, that's from the federal language, but are we really in this region promoting global competitiveness? It just seems like we're not, that word is not going to have a lot of applicability here. Regional competitiveness, whatever. Anyway, so I have questions like that, and I'm happy to, again, share them with you and CC anybody else. And I might as well CC the group. So
sure.
It's a lot of stuff, but I, again, don't want to take up everybody's time because it would take probably a half hour to go through all this.
Sure. Thanks, Eric.
Sure.
Hey, Adam, this is Paul. I just want to make a general comment. There's been a lot of kind of innovation with ITS and basically with connected and autonomous vehicles in the last few years. Basically, the last LRTP did have, I think, maybe a paragraph devoted to that, but I think more could be done with that. And certainly by 2050, basically, regardless of what kind of expert you kind of talk to, they basically all concur that we'll have connected autonomous vehicles by that point in time. Some people think it'll come a lot sooner than that, and how much sooner is, I guess, a matter up for debate. But it seems like people typically say like some point in the 2030s or maybe early 2040s.
Okay, thank you, Paul.
Sure.
So with that, if there's no more comments at this point, again, we'll send this out to everybody afterwards, but did want to touch on a couple other topics that our team is working on right now, sort of in two buckets. One is with some research that we're doing. So in just a moment, you'll hear from Matthew Lehane, who's put together kind of a data snapshot of what the magnitude of the COVID-19 pandemic has been here in our region, sort of on a more local level. We're also looking at some potential funding and policy considerations. So of course, the new transportation bill could be taking place at some point within the next year, year and a half. And then we're also monitoring the state's development and prioritization of the VTrans needs. And so we'll be hearing again from Chris Wichman at OIP at our November TAC meeting. And then secondly, with the call for projects, that is something that had gotten underway when we were working on the 2050 LRTP back at the end of 2019. So we're going to be picking that up and sort of reinstating that. So we're in the process right now of starting to review the now amended 2045 project list. And so we're going to be working with VDOT, DRPT, and the other transportation agencies here shortly to, again, resume this call for projects likely by the end of the year. So wanted to bring that to everybody's attention as well. And before I turn it over to Matthew, would like to see if there's any questions on what we've covered so far with the LRTP.
Hey, Adam, this is Paul from Spotsylvania. Just had a comment on the call for projects. Given that there might be some smart scale projects that are selected basically for funding by the CTB in early 2021, it'd be nice to try to get them into this version of the 2050 LRTP. I mean, just with the timing for that, would it allow for those projects to also be added?
That's a really good question, Paul. That is definitely our intention. I think that what we're attempting to do is for the few projects that are not already in the project list for 2045 is sort of assume those as working projects that we're going to consider as part of the call for projects. So we're going to work with you guys to make sure those are captured and then hope for funding from Smart Scale, of course, but then be able to, on the back end, hopefully by January, potentially early February, depending on how that shakes out with Smart Scale, make that determination at that point. So the November, December timeframe, it won't be a hard stop per se. So we do want to account for round 4 results with the project list for 2050.
And with regards just to the amount of funding available in the LRTP, has there been any new information from the state on that?
No new information per se. I did speak with Stephen briefly a couple weeks ago, just letting him know that we would be at some point toward the end of the year, potentially early next year, be working on the projections for revenue. So we haven't made a formal request for that yet, Paul.
Thank you.
So with that, Mr. Chair, if I could, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Matthew to go through a quick presentation on a COVID-19 data snapshot.
Certainly.
And you all should be able to see my screen. So just going to quickly go through this, just showing some of our analysis on some of the COVID-19 data that we've seen at the state level as well as at the local level. So this is from a survey, Virginia Commuter Survey for VDOT DRPT, showing at the statewide level some of the commuting trends pre-COVID as well as post-COVID. So basically we can see that about 10 to 15% pre-COVID were working from home. And then after about 50 to 60% were working from home. And then kind of the same sort of data sets here, how long people's commutes were. You can see the drastic shift between some of the 15 to 30 minute, 30 to 45 and longer commutes, just drastically shifting to, of course, work from home. And then the same can be said for the Fredericksburg VDOT district level, 10 to 15% were working from home. And then now maybe 50 to 60% were working from home, as well as you can see a lot of the changes in some of the other commuter services, carpooling, slugging, van pooling, commuter rail, and bus as well. And the same thing, just the changes in travel time. And then now the second section goes into some of the Virginia snapshot of some of the transportation changes. So this is from a VDOT presentation to CTB on September 16th, outlining the statewide volume changes, all vehicles as well as trucks. And the notations on the slide are just the governor's actions. So number 1 being when the state of emergency was declared, and then 12, 13, 14, phases 1, 2, and 3 beginning. And this is just statewide on all the roadways. So we see there was a total of about 64% change at the lowest point, and then currently we're hovering around a minus 15% change from average. And the same thing with crash trends. Of course, less traffic, crashes went down, and then they have, of course, with traffic going up, have slowly creeped back up. This data is, of course, incomplete, but will change as we move into the next couple of months. And then another subsection here is just of interesting note, the changes in gas prices. So as demand for gas went down, this chart is showing from AAA, the weekly lower Atlantic, so Virginia, Maryland, North Carolina, average gas prices pretty drastically dropping here to some of the lowest points we've seen in years, actually, and then slowly creeping back up as demand has risen again. And then more at a local level, Virginia average gas prices, and then Fredericksburg average gas prices from AAA as well. And this data was taken from September 25th, so the current average shows the average for that day, and then a year ago for that day as well at the bottom there. So looking at Fredericksburg here, as we go to the next section, some of the Fredericksburg area transportation snapshots. So from one of our platforms that we have access to called Streetlight Data, this is their data set of the total vehicle miles traveled in the 3 FAMPO counties, so the city of Fredericksburg, Spotsylvania County, and Stafford County. And we can see the same kind of data set that we've seen with the VDOT volume trends that were previously shown. So there's a pretty drastic drop in March, and then kind of slowly risen and then leveled off to a little bit below what our average would have been last year. So the black line is showing the 7-day moving average of those changes, and kind of gives you a little bit a better understanding than just looking at it at daily, because it goes up and down for weekends and specific days of the week. And the next slide here is some of the, again, from the VDOT presentation to the CTB, some of the traffic trends on I-95 northbound, southbound. You can see the changes in March and April, and then slowly creeping back up, but hovering still below what our average would have been last year. And then a little bit of a deeper dive in some of our local transportation agencies. So GW Ride Connect, some of their commuting statistics. So changes in leased parking space utilization. So GW Ride Connect goes out twice a month and gets data on the utilization of the parking spaces. So we can see the blue line showing 2019, March through September, and then the orange line, 2020, March through September. So you can see a pretty drastic change in how people are moving about in the region. People are not commuting north like they used to. There still is, of course, some people who are, but nowhere near as much as we saw last year, or even in January or February. And the same thing can be shown with van pools. There's still some, but a lot less than there would have been compared to last year. And then again, new commuter applications, again, shows the same thing. The blue line is for all of 2019, and then the orange being through January, through where we are in August, where this data was from of 2020, seeing the drastic drop in March, and then kind of slowly creeping back up a bit, but somewhat leveling off as essential workers are now going back in, and they're staying there, and the people who are able to work from home are mostly continuing to work from home. And the same can be said for the VRE ridership as well. A pretty big drop from where our ridership was in January, February, as well as where it was last year. So it is slowly creeping back up, albeit at a pretty slow rate. But people are going back, but not too quick yet. And the same thing with Fred Transit, a pretty big drop, and then kind of slowly going back up as we move into the fall here. So kind of basically what we've noticed is that vehicle volume is about 15% less in September, and commuter volume is about 80 to 90% less than their 2019 averages. Vehicle volume has almost returned to normal from its drop back in March/April, and then transit says commuter services are rebounding, albeit at a much slower rate. And the residents are basically commuting less for work, but are still traveling in the Fredericksburg region. So even though there's so many people working from home, vehicle volume does not equate to the same changes in commuter volume. So most respondents, in essence, are continuing to work from home. And that is it. Happy to take any questions if anybody has any. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Adam, for that presentation. I think those of us who are still driving back and forth on 95 can certainly see the difference in traffic out there. Any other questions for Matthew on his presentation? All right, well, thanks again. And hearing none, we'll move on to the next item, we are 7H for regional study ideas and proposals. Adam?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chair. So we had a meeting with VDOT a couple weeks ago and talked about Smart Fuel Round 5. And so it does seem like a ways off. We're still waiting, of course, for the scores for Round 4, but we did want to throw out to the group the topic of new study ideas and proposals, and just wanted to make the offer as an MPO, if there's any data that we can collect or do some analysis for any localities, if there's any hot spots that you guys are thinking about or that your board members are thinking about, more than happy to put some baseline data together to help support a study proposal. Or if there's any ideas, we'd like to get those to VDOT sooner than later. So just wanted to put this out for discussion, Mr. Chair.
Hey, Adam, this is Paul from Spotsylvania. Just a clarification question, like is this a VDOT request of the FAMPO localities, or who is making the request?
So I don't want to speak for VDOT. It's not necessarily a formal request from them. It just came up in a meeting that we had with VDOT, and just wanted to coordinate the process of starting to develop some ideas.
When are you looking for feedback on this?
There's not necessarily a definitive timeline. I think it would be helpful if perhaps by the end of October, if there's any ideas from the localities or any of the other transit agencies that are on the call, that would be great.
I mean, I'll say that basically with the fact that Spotsylvania is going to get the new VA clinic, basically down near exit 126. Basically, probably the issue of kind of the exit 126 interchange and then some of the roadways in the area, like a study of those. I'll say like with 208, I think that's never been studied. From 4 Mile Fork going back towards Smith Station Road could be looked at, potentially a STARS type study for that. I'll say that with Route 1, I think we've studied most of it in the region, but one stretch that is missing is the city stretch starting from Route 3 down to 4 Mile Fork in Spotsylvania. I'll say basically in Spotsylvania, Route 17 from Germana Point Drive east to New Post. That's an area that we're looking at that's about ready to explode. So that's another potential study idea. I guess, Adam, would you like us to send you an email with these?
I think that would probably be most helpful, Paul.
Okay, can do that.
All right, any other questions for Adam or further discussion? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to item 7I, the proposed language for the TAC bylaws for remote participation. Stacy.
Okay, yeah, so let me give Adam a second to pull this up so you can see it on your screen. Okay, so why do we need to include language on remote participation in our bylaws? Simply because it's overdue is the short answer. In 2014, the General Assembly actually required public bodies to adopt a policy regarding individual participation through electronic means. And that should be adopted before members are allowed to actually use the electronic participation provisions. Further, the General Assembly's requirement from 2014 specifies that any electronic participation policy must include an approval process for such participation. So the language that you're looking at on your screen for section 6 is language that we've taken from FOIA public meeting laws, as well as suggested language from the Virginia FOIA Council. So that's where this language is coming from. And you might be asking, well, if we needed to adopt this in 2014 before we were allowed to attend remotely, how are we allowed to meet right now? Adam, if you could scroll down to section 7, please. So currently, because we're under a state of emergency, in April 2020, the state adopted language that would allow us to meet with a virtual quorum when the governor has declared a state of emergency. There's a few other provisions you can see in that section there that has to be followed. So that's how we're allowed to meet now. This item is just up for discussion because we're probably going to be under a state of emergency for some time. However, once we are no longer in a state of emergency, we do need to have a policy adopted to allow remote participation. And I do have some resources that I can send to everyone if you would like to review what FOIA says on electronic participation, as well as to answer any questions on where this proposed language came from. Any questions? Mr. Chair, go ahead, I'm sorry.
This is Michelle. Stacy, thank you for briefing us on this. I did see in the FOIA information that there is some language about allowing a remote participant. But your line on the top of page 4 about if a member's participation from a remote location is challenged by a TAC member, then the TAC shall vote rather to allow such participation. That's not straight out of the FOIA information, correct?
From Title 2.2, Chapter 37, that's correct. We've adopted that language from the Virginia FOIA Council recommended language. So you don't have to use that exact wording. However, the committee must adopt some sort of policy to approve. The FOIA Council recommends that the request to attend remotely, as long as it is provided under FOIA law, which there's 3 different criteria for that it's automatically permitted unless a committee member would challenge it. Why might they challenge it? Well, if you look up on page 3, there's 3 different reasons. So you have unlimited use of participation if you have a permanent or temporary disability or other medical condition. However, on number 2, you're allowed only 2 exemptions for remote participation if you're claiming a personal matter or personal emergency prevents your physical attendance. It could be, for example, that a member challenges another member's request to participate remotely if, for example, they've already used those 2 exceptions in that calendar year. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but you do have to have some kind of policy that includes the approval process for such participation.
No, that answers my question, and I was aware of the requirements for the 3 different exceptions and the requirement for a means to vote. Just interested in where the exact language came from. Thank you.
Yeah, and I can send everyone the it's called the Virginia Freedom of Information Advisory Council electronic meetings guidance, so I can go ahead and send that if you want, and I have highlighted the language that they recommend.
This is Alex again. Actually, I got a question for VDOT on this. I know there was some question about that came up during the policy committee meeting about being able to amend their bylaws without it being explicitly listed in the UPWP. I just want to make sure we're not under the same restrictions here as far as the TAC committee and modifying our bylaws, or do we need to modify the UPWP first to include, a bylaw modification before we can make these changes?
But your UPWP has some very specific language about modifying your bylaws related to COVID-19. So technically Section 7 does that. Section 6 is probably not related to that, but it does relate to remote meetings. So we could probably let these two things go together in this instance. Policy committee had a number of other items that were not related to remote meetings or COVID-19 in their draft. And that was a question that we had related to that.
Okay, thanks.
This is Jamie Jackson with Fred. I just had a question on number 3 for the exemptions. Is there any reason why, I guess the recommendation, and I know these may have been pulled, was that it references a member lives 60 miles versus the work location? And I don't know if that needs to be a discussion item or a thought item for the group, but I would just think that a person chooses, you know, where they live, and I could live in Norfolk if I wanted to. But that wouldn't seem as applicable to me as if I, you know, chose to work in a location that may be outside, let's say for a DRPT, if they're in for some reason in DC, that would be eligible as opposed to if they just lived in DC but maybe worked locally.
Mr. Chair, I can answer that if I might.
Sure.
So, Ms. Jackson, that's coming directly from FOIA public meeting laws, section 2.2-3708.2. So that's not language that we're suggesting. That's directly taken from there. I'm not quite sure what the reasoning is, why it says lives versus commuting or works, but it does say a member lives 60 miles or more.
Okay, so
that only applies to regional public bodies. So you might not be familiar with that if you're dealing with local committees. That's specifically for regional bodies.
All right. Thank you.
This is Paul from Spotsylvania. I had a comment just to kind of piggyback on what Alex kind of said with the UPWP and kind of bylaws questions that have come up recently. I'll say that in the existing approved UPWP, basically on page 37, there's an end product number 11, which includes staff support for all FAMPO committees. This should cover anything the committees want to do. The staff work for the policy committee, including changing bylaws.
Yeah, I would agree with that. This is Jason. I thought it's a little odd to have to put something specific about bylaw changes in a document like the UPWP when bylaws are routinely something that various boards and committees always deal with as part of their regular working order. You know, a review or change to the bylaws is, you know, something that normally happens during the course of any given body's work. I'm not really sure how that was distinguished otherwise, but it seems that staff is already providing the necessary support for that and should be without having to call out specifically, just as much as meeting minutes and other things aren't called out specifically as part of staff duties. Those are understood.
We have provided the federal code language for providing information in your UPWP for specific task items, and that was provided after the last policy committee meeting.
Yeah, Michelle, this is Jason. I know we read that. You know, there's nothing in there that we see as saying you have to amend the bylaws. You have to take something specific action-wise in the UPWP. I think that there's already broad, as was referenced previously, those things are already covered in the UPWP. I mean, I'm not really sure why we're getting down to the specifics of requiring bylaws be a specific action item in the UPWP. There's nothing that suggests that in the code you all sent.
That is the code section that refers to that, and that was vetted through central office and the FHWA.
Hey, Michelle, this is Paul from Spotsylvania. Do you have anything in writing from Federal Highway regarding that?
We conversed with them as far as, what do you mean? You want an email from the FHWA? You want what? No, I don't have an email from them, but we coordinate with them. Would you like them to send you that code section?
I think, given just that the question came up at the policy committee, I think that Federal Highway, basically, a response is warranted in this case. For the questions raised at the policy, and then I'll say at the TAC, basically this issue came up, I think, at the last meeting when we talked about changing the TAC voting.
The policy committee requested Ms. Parker to respond, and she did.
But right now, though, you don't have any documentation from Federal Highway to back up basically what VDOT staff said, correct?
Are you implying that we are making things up, Paul? Are we incorrect?
So we just want documentation from Federal Highway.
Michelle, this is Jason. I don't think Paul is trying to imply that you guys are incorrect, but it was pretty clear in the policy committee meeting that even the policy committee was questioning what Marcy was saying. So I would think, just as a matter of course, that having all that brought before, I mean, that would be in Marcy's benefit too. We're just reflecting what our boards are asking us to do. So, there's nothing here at a staff level. So I just want to make that clear. But I do know that our board has similarly requested, something in writing or some sort of ability to talk with central office or FHWA about this. It's very, very odd to our board that we're being forced to amend the UPWP to, be able to just do something that's really pretty straightforward and a normal part of board and committee operations. So I'm not saying that it's wrong or it's right. I'm just saying that our board has specifically said, hey, we really want to understand this more. This is unusual.
Well, it's really not unusual. It's really something that has to happen to every MPO around the state, or really around the nation. And it's really not a big request that we're making. It's just to be in compliance with the federal code that was supplied by Ms. Parker at the request of the policy board. And we did supply that, and we did have a conversation with central office and FHWA, and that was supplied.
So this is Paul. Basically, it's been common practice that MPOs in Virginia and basically nationwide change committee bylaws, basically in the FAMPO UPWP, even if it's required basically with federal CFR that basically be in the UPWP. Number 11 on page 37 covers that.
And Paul, I think you or somebody had indicated we had received word from at least one or two other pretty sizable MPOs that they've never had to go and specifically call this out separately as an item in the UPWP to change their bylaws. They've only ever just referenced that section. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. And also that FAMPO has changed its bylaws recently. So the policy committee, I think, changed their bylaws back in 2018. I say that the TAC and the CTAC, they've had some changes in the bylaws in recent years. I say number 11, basically on page 37, covers that, even if it needs to be in the UPWP, which is a open question.
Well, Paul, I think that would be subject to interpretation. We'd be happy to ask the FHWA to interpret that.
So well, I don't know, maybe this is a matter really for the policy committee, although I think that, I guess, Michelle, it's probably going to come up at the next policy committee. So if you and Marcy want to just talk and coordinate before that, I have a feeling that this question is going to come up. And I guess to whatever degree you guys have that information from FHWA and central office, or if you can provide examples of other MPOs doing that, then I think that's what they're going to want to see.
As soon as we have the policy committee agenda, we'll do that, but I can ask FHWA for their opinion on this.
All right, I guess getting back kind of the topic at hand here, since we weren't really tasked by the policy committee to kind of investigate UPWP or modifying their bylaws. Stacey, I just wanted to go back real quick again about modifying our TAC bylaws. It seems like we'd be okay without doing any UPWP modifications to add this remote participation and virtual meetings for emergency. Did I hear you correct saying that we couldn't actually take action on approving this amendment to the bylaws until we were back and holding physical meetings?
No, that's not correct. We were recommending this for discussion today, only for the fact that members might want to review some of the supplemental reference material that I can send to you. However, you know, if you guys want to take a vote on it today, that's up to you. I will say that section 6, because we're under a state of emergency currently, and that's what allows us to meet all virtually and you all to vote all virtually and have a virtual quorum. It's not time sensitive at this moment to get section 6 voted on and incorporated into the bylaws. I think we have some time to do that. And section 7 on the virtual meetings during a state of emergency, that doesn't have to be in your bylaws in order for us to be meeting right now and continue to meet right now, because we are allowed to do so under state law in a state of emergency. So time sensitive wise, you would not have to act on this today.
Okay, thank you for that clarification, Stacey. Then I think, yeah, the best course of action would be if you could kind of send out that, you know, supporting information to the group. We can all take our time to review and possibly vote at this at our November meeting.
Sure, I will do that.
Okay, well, I guess this kind of takes us on to the next item, number 7J, our November TAC meeting date. Currently, we've got this date scheduled for Monday, November 2nd. I know Election Day is going to be that Tuesday. Is there any interest by the group in possibly postponing our meeting date by 1 week and moving it to Monday, November, was that the 11th, I believe?
9th.
The 9th?
9th.
Sounds reasonable to me. This is Paul.
Yes.
Good for me. This is Eric.
All right, well, then hearing that, I'll kind of go ahead and make a motion then so we can modify the November TAC meeting date from Monday, November 2nd to Monday, November 9th.
Second.
All right, is there any further discussion? All right, hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, well, hearing none then, we'll go ahead and change our meeting date for November to Monday, November 9th. Okay, moving on next, correspondence.
So, Mr. Chair, we do have a letter from Fred. They do have a new member of the TAC, Mr. Aiden Quirk, who has accepted a position as the Deputy Director at Fred. So we would like to say welcome to Aiden.
Hey, thanks a lot. Very happy to be here.
All right, welcome aboard, Aiden.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
All right, well, I guess that wraps it up for correspondence. Staff reports?
Don't have anything new, Mr. Chair.
All right, I guess we'll move on then to the member reports. I guess I'll start off myself with Stafford County. We really don't have anything else to add than what's been discussed here today.
Hey, Alex, it's Jason. I just wanted to correct one thing. I'd take a moment and apologize to FAMPO staff, Jamie, or others I disagreed with earlier on the deferral on the call for projects. I went back and listened to the meeting while sitting here, and I was incorrect. The committee did defer the official call for action and asked the TAC to bring back a process to score those FAMPO locality projects only. So it sounds like we ended up with a reasonable solution earlier, but I wanted to apologize for confusion on my end. That's not what I had recalled, but I was wrong.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, this is Jamie. I just want to respond to Jason. I think through all of this, and obviously being newer to the TAC, I just appreciate the engagement and the understanding and the passion for our jurisdictions. So I think as we continue to focus on moving the ball forward with TAC, I think we can put our elected officials and also our leadership in a better position. So I think we do need to continue to move the ball forward. And I think, being all in this together, no matter how chaotic it can be is important. So I do just want to put that out there as well, because I think we are trying to get to the right location. And sometimes it takes, as similar for other MPOs I've been a part of, it takes the policy committee a little bit longer to get to where the TAC is that does the everyday work. So.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I think you make a great point, Jamie. It's pretty obvious that the policy committee is in a contentious, difficult point right now, and I think it can trickle into staff levels at times. And just kind of going back and remembering that we're all in this together, trying to help the policy committee make the best decisions. So it's point well taken.
All right, are there any other member reports?
This is Kate from GWI Connect. I would just note there was an article in the Freelance Star over the weekend that talked about the impact of COVID-19 on slugging and van pools. So GWI Connect provided some information for that, but I thought it was a pretty interesting article. And as it referenced, we are currently working with all of our van pool operators to get a better picture of who's operating, who may be paused right now, but starting back up kind of first of the year. And so we're updating our records currently, and we'll have some more information probably next month on kind of where that lands. But we're just continuing to move forward. And as you guys saw in the data that Matthew shared, we're not getting the volume of applications that we had gotten in the past, but we're still getting about 20 a month. So, I mean, there are definitely still people that are relying on alternate modes of transportation to get to work. And so I just think it's important that we remember that. So thank you.
All right, well, if that wraps it up for member reports, I'd like to make a motion to go ahead and adjourn the meeting.
Second.
All right. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, we'll consider the meeting adjourned, and we'll see you Monday, November 9th.
Thank you.
Thank you.